Today we're going to look at small marching band arranging, the opening hit. The opening hit serves many purposes from a musical and effect standpoint. It needs to be loud and summarize the emotion, events, and expectations of what is to come. In this video, we're going to be looking at things from a more mechanical standpoint in terms of how you go through the process of taking a selection of music and turning it into a fully orchestrated musical passage. At any point in a marching show, there are always two musical goals: clarity and sounding great. Everything we write has to fit these two precepts. Constraining those goals are the instrumentation and playing ability of the musicians. Small marching bands are a challenge because creating clarity and sounding good means you have to be careful with orchestration and write for the group's strengths. Here is the instrumentation of the group we'll be writing for. In addition, here are the ranges of what the instruments can comfortably perform for this particular group. Ranges are written in both transposed and concert pitch. Every band is unique in terms of ability, and our goal is to make this particular band sound as good as possible. This is what the director has indicated each instrument can comfortably play, given the student's ability level. As we approach the extremes of an instrument's range, the quality of playing will go down. Now, this next section will be a cheat sheet you can screenshot for your own arranging. When writing for small bands, you have to avoid long phrases and create written-in places to breathe. You cannot effectively stagger breathe with small bands. Rhythm is good because all bands, no matter how good, struggle with sustaining chords. Now, even though each group presents unique abilities and challenges, there are some general doubling rules that can be followed which create a coherent ensemble sonority during loud, full ensemble tutti moments regardless of the ensemble. Flute will always double trumpet 1 an octave higher, clarinet will double trumpet 2 at pitch, alto saxophone and mellophone will double, tuba and baritone sax will double, and tenor saxophone and trombone/baritones will double. This means 95% of the time there are only 5 melodic voices we can use at once. With our instrumentation and precepts in place, let's talk about arranging. Writing music is similar to building a campfire. For those who haven't built a campfire before, one of the most common shapes is what we call the teepee setup. While you see the finished product on the outside, what you don't see is the complex layering used on the inside. The first step is getting tinder. Not that kind. These are typically small shavings or dry leaves that are easily lit with a match. Next is small kindling, which is small twigs that will easily catch fire from the shavings. From there we have medium kindling, which is slightly larger sticks, then large kindling, which is even larger sticks and small pieces of branches. Depending on the size and complexity of your fire, you can have multiple levels of kindling. Finally, we have the fire logs on the outside. These are the logs you saw in the first photo and are what keeps the fire burning strong and for long periods of time. In our case, fire is equivalent to making the music interesting and engaging. Step 1. Tinder, the musical motif. This is the bit of musical material everything will be based on. For this show, these two measures will serve as our small musical tinder. Some of the best material you can use is that which is small and extremely flexible. Our motif is clearly in G minor, so that will serve as our home key. This motif was picked out by the director to be a recurring theme throughout the show. Step 2. Small kindling, the basic harmony. What I've done is created a basic harmonic outline for us to follow. Starting out, I have the basic motif for the first two measures arriving on a G minor chord in measure 3. From there, the bass descends a third while the treble remains the same, creating an E flat major 7 chord. We repeat the descending bass motion again, giving us a C minor 9 chord. This will then resolve into a D major chord to create the dominant function needed to return back to G minor. The point of what we are writing is to create tension and release that tension. Starting with a unison statement of the motif establishes the key and melodic material, but also allows the expansion into a full G minor chord to add interest. From there, we add harmonic tension by using more and more colorful chords with larger extensions. We start with a basic triad, then a major 7 chord, then a minor 9 chord. At this point, we've reached maximum tension and moved to D major, the dominant chord, to finally resolve back to G minor. Remember, this is a small band, so we can't have our hit going on for too long, otherwise they will struggle. These chords will get expanded considerably anyways, so less is more for now. Now that we have our small kindling of a chord progression, let's move on. Step 3, medium kindling, harmonic movement, basic rhythm, and basic counterline. I'm going to break this step into two parts. For this first part, we have more developed chord voicings and harmonic movement. This is focused on creating smooth voice leading, adding melodic movement, and adding basic rhythm. First off, I've taken every chord and extended them 2 measures each. In measure 3, we've removed the 5th of the chord D since that note is unnecessary. In addition, we've created smoother voice leading in measure 2 by sustaining the A, which creates movement in thirds going upwards from measure 2 to measure 3. This is the other reason we got rid of the clunky 5th. From here, we have contrary, meaning opposite, motion between the bass and soprano voices from measure 4 to 5. This adds interest to the sound and creates smoother, step-by-step voice leading. That smoothness is aided by the second treble voice sustaining G, which becomes the third of the E-flat major 7 chord. Again, we are omitting the 5th. In measure 6, the bass voice moves down another third. However, due to range constrictions of the first trumpet, in measure 6 I can't go up another third, so I repeat the same motion from measure 4. In order to avoid boring repetition, the second treble voice moves down to the third of the C minor 9 chord instead of sustaining. Also, the upper bass voice is going to the 5th of the chord G to create a more resonant, solid sound in the bass clef, while the top treble voice is going to split, so we have the 7th and 9th as well. Moving from C minor 9 to D major has very little movement, so in measure 8 we're going to shift the bass up a half step to create some added dissonance and chromatic movement from C to D and G to A. D major in measure 9 also has a 4-2-3 suspension neighbor group added to create more harmonic tension and release. Now, the director told me the trombones and baritones can occasionally split, very rarely, so on this D major chord I'm going to split them on the root in 5th. Finally, we resolve back to G minor again. Altogether, it sounds like this. Part 2 of this step is adding rhythmic interest in small pieces of the counterline. Measures 1 and 2 are unchanged. Measure 3, we've added a counterline which starts on the root G, then moves to the second of the G minor chord on beat 3 to add tension. Measure 4 changed the treble rhythm to beats 1, 2, and 4, while the bass is on 1 and 3. This ensures someone is always articulating on every beat to create rhythmic interest, and also adds articulation because sustaining is hard for small bands. In measure 5, the counterline moves to the second again on beat 3, which creates continuity in the counterline by doing the same thing twice. Now, measure 6 has a lot of changes. We've added syncopation for added interest and a quick chance to breathe. The counterline is also staying on the second for more tension till it moves with the top treble voice on beat 4 and 8th note motion to really propel into the C minor 9 chord. Measure 8 gives the players another chance to breathe and creates some rhythmic contrast to the D major chords. Measures 9 and 10 are unchanged. Measures 11 through 13 have been changed to a unison G so it doesn't clash as much with the counterline. We added an extra measure onto the end because the counterline would end with an F and G dissonance, which wouldn't give the sense of finality I'm looking for in this hit. Altogether, it sounds like this. Step 4, large kindling, counterline in advanced rhythms. This step is also going to be broken into 2 parts for ease of explanation. I've moved the counterline to a different staff in order to keep the score clean. If you notice, the non-counterline has 3 changes. The first is in measure 3 with the addition of a rest on the and of beat 4 to give musicians a breath. In measure 5, beat 4 is also a rest for the same reason. Then, the D major chord was extended 1 measure with the counterline holding the suspension for all of measure 9, moving on measure 10, then holding the final resolution by itself in measure 11. The counterline is currently focused on target notes. These are notes not normally a part of the chord, which adds more tension. In addition, the counterline is focused on holding over bar lines in order to create greater rhythmic variety. In measure 1, the counterline enters on G on beat 3, holds over the bar line, then has a fancy decoration whose only purpose is to extend the G without just holding the note as a boring whole note. Measure 3 is the same as before, but now the A is held over the bar line, giving the rest of the band a chance to breathe while the counterline sustains. Measures 5 through 8 are identical to the previous step. In measures 9, the counterline is holding the suspended 4 to really build the tension. Measure 10 is playing with the idea of resolution by giving above and below the resolution note without actually stopping on it. Then, just to fake out the audience, once the counterline does resolve in measure 11, the rest of the band cuts out. By the way, you're going to see many more triplets in just a second. Finally, everybody re-enters in measure 12 for the counterline to restate the opening motif. Altogether, it sounds like this. For part 2, the full band hasn't changed, but the counterline finally has its full rhythmic complexity. Measures 1 and 2 are unchanged. Measures 3 adds a triplet run on beat 2 up to the A, which really accents to the audience the dissonance the second scale degree brings to the minor chord. In measure 4, the A and G have been decorated with descending triplet runs that smoothly connect the G on beat 4 to the downbeat of measure 5. Another triplet run on beat 2 mimics the rhythmic motion of measure 3 to create cohesion to the counterline and again accent the second scale degree of the chord. From here to the end is unchanged. Our final piano reduction sounds like this. Step 5, Fire Logs, the orchestration. Finally, we have our fire logs. We are going to reference back to the doublings we talked about at the beginning of the video to use in orchestrating our hit. We'll start with the easiest voices. The counterline will be played by the mellophone and alto saxophone. The bottom bass voice will be applied to the tuba and baritone saxophone. The top treble voice will be applied to trumpet 1 and flute, but an octave higher for flute. The second treble voice will be placed in trumpet 2 and clarinet. Finally, the upper bass voice will be placed in trombone/baritone, and when the voice splits, that upper voice will be applied to the tenor saxophone. Important things to note are the crescendo in measure 2, the marcatos in measure 6 to really shorten the note length and emphasize the rhythmic variety. Also, the accents with tenutos in measure 8 to really emphasize strong attacks, but to hold for full length. Anytime we have a whole note leading into a rest, we want to tie it with an eighth note to help emphasize to the students to cut off on beat 1. This is a common practice in band and marching band music. Let's take a listen to the final product we've created with some added percussion for full emphasis. Don't click off yet. I have a bonus for you in just a second. First off, thank you so much for watching my video. This has been Small Marching Band Arranging, the opening hit. My last video on top 10 time-saving tips for finale did much better than I was expecting, and I'm excited to keep making content for you all. Let me know in the comments if you learned anything, have any questions, or have any suggestions for future video topics. Don't forget to also like and subscribe to help grow the channel. Thank you again. Now, as a bonus, I've orchestrated every step we did to really show off how the ensemble changes with each step of complexity.